Jeff, thank you so much for being with us today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
It's just an honor. You have an amazing story of restoration. I love watching you on ESPN. I tell everybody you're the best analyst they got.
I appreciate it. I don't know if that's true, but I'll take it.
I want to just start at the beginning, kind of walk through your story and your journey of faith. And do you remember picking up a football for the very first time?
I remember the first year I played for the Northeast Mustangs in Atlanta, and I was not very good. I had begged my mom to play. You know, I was being raised by a single mom, and she was not a football fan. I played soccer and baseball. This was the first contact sport, and I remember going in, I had no idea what I was doing. I think I was in 6th grade or somewhere around there, and it was by weight. So, you know, you had to be a certain weight. I think it was under 110 pounds or something like that. And it was just, you know, it was not what I expected. I had visions in my head I was going to be much better than I was. It took a few years. You know?
At that moment, could you picture yourself being the best ever at what you did?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I do remember begging the coach to let me play. I was like, Coach, let me play. You know, he was trying to be nice. He's like, oh, we'll get you some time. You know, he was like, this poor kid has no idea how bad he really is.
Do you remember what position you played?
I played all over. I played, but I was a smaller kid, so I played linebacker and tight end and receiver, that kind of stuff. So, and running back. I played running back because I wanted to be William Andrews. That was my favorite player. He was an Atlanta Falcon, and that's who I wanted to be like. Except I was, you know, slow and couldn't run the ball very well.
So, how did it progress? How did you finally spend more time at it, grow? What happened?
Yeah, you know, when I got into the next couple years, there was a guy named Ray Umfenauer and his son Chip, and they really taught me how to play. My mom worked for Ray, and his son was a very good athlete, Chip, and was a sprinter and was a really good athlete who had played some football. And so they showed me, hey, this is what it looks like to tackle. Here's what it looks like to block. You know, here's how you have to do it. And I just remember them taking the time to kind of show me. And then it took off. You know, once I started playing, I loved the game and I loved to play. And I tell people all the time now, you know, some kids like the noise and some don't. Mm-hmm. And I was one that did, right? Mm-hmm. I liked to get in there and mix it up. And that was fun for me. And it was a great release for me. And then as my body grew and you get bigger and stronger than some other, you know, then you really begin to excel. And so that's what my high school looked like. And by the time I was a junior in high school, I had offers to go play in colleges. And so I knew at some point I was going to go play college football.
Now in high school, you get to know a young lady by the name of Karen.
Yes,
maybe lived around the corner a couple blocks.
Yeah. She lived about 5 minutes away. And we got to know each other early in high school. So our high school went 8th through 12th grade. And so she's older than me. She's a year older than me in school. And so she walked up to me at recess or something, and her friends had said, he has eyes just like you. You know, you should tell him you're going to have his babies one day. They're going to have blue eyes. And so she did. And as most 8th grade, you know, from where I was from would say, I said, you want to practice. Real class act all the way around. And she was like, oh my God. You know, so it was, but you know, that started the courting, as we would say.
There you go.
From that point.
Very smooth move.
Yeah.
So how do you end up at North Carolina with Mack Brown?
So I'm recruited by a bunch of schools. My favorite was probably Clemson. I wasn't recruited by Georgia Tech. They thought I was too small. So a lot of the ACC schools, Auburn wanted me, but my parents wanted me to go to academics. Where they're like, listen, you know, you're not the biggest guy. You're a good football player, but we don't know when this is going to end. And my mom is a teacher. And I'm from a family of teachers. Sister's a teacher, aunt was a principal and teacher. So everybody in my family, you know, you're coming from there. So education always was a premium. And she and my stepdad sat me down. They said, listen, you know, football could end tomorrow. You need to go somewhere where your degree matters and counts. And so my stepdad really liked the academies. I didn't know that I wanted to go spend the next 5 years, you know, in the military. If football was good, I didn't want to get, you know, stuck behind that. And so I'm from a military family as well. And so I kind of weighed my options, and North Carolina fit the bill of a good education. I felt like they had a good football team, and it turned out, man, I mean, it was just God's grace because we were really good and finished in the top 10 3 of my 5 years. I mean, it was I could not have asked for a better fit than the University of North Carolina.
You were all conference.
I was all conference twice. I was academic all conference twice. I mean, it really was the perfect place. And Mac Brown, who was my head, he provided such structure and being in class. They had people who would go check you, and if you weren't in class, Mad Dog, who was our strength coach, Jim, he was going to run you until you wanted to die. He'd say, I'm not going to run you till I'm going to run you till you ask me to die. And that's what he did. And I tested it early in my college career, and it showed up the way he said. All these barrel rolls, and they look much better in the movies than in real life. In real life, you got grass all over your face, you're throwing up. It was miserable. So, I realized school was a big deal. I better show up, but it was a fantastic place.
Mac Brown, I think, is an incredible leader and coach, and I bet it was just a blessing to be around him for 4 years.
There's no doubt. He called you to a significant level of accountability, and he called out my leadership, and I was really appreciative because I was a captain in high school. I led my team there, and then early on, I was a captain for a number of years at Carolina. But he would call that out in you. Hey, listen, if this is your role, this is how you have to be. You have to lead in the classroom. You got to lead in workouts and conditioning. You got to lead on the field. And to help forge a young man, it was really a very good situation. And the coaches that he provided you, Eddie Williamson, who was my offensive line coach, he called the same thing, and they believed it, and they wouldn't let you slide, and I appreciate that now looking back, because so often, especially in athletics, if you excel, people begin to let other areas of your life slide.
Yeah.
And neither of them would. They wanted and expected and really demanded a certain level of excellence. And I can remember being at Carolina and watching Mac Brown essentially, kick guys off the team. And they were great football players, but he had zero tolerance policies and just would send guys on and say, hey, look, we can find other talent. Don't believe that you're the last guy with talent. Mm-hmm. And I appreciated that. I mean, it put a level of fear in you, a healthy fear that, I may think I'm good, but there's somebody else who can come and do this job as well.
Next man up.
That's right.
Now, are you staying in touch with Karen during college?
We are. We continue to date in college, and we're kind of on off. And she likes to tell people she dated me. I didn't necessarily date her in college. So, and I was unsaved, when I was in school, and being a college athlete and being successful at that, I didn't always make the best decisions. And I remember there would be campus pastors and different people who would be around, and I used to give them the spiritual Heisman, right? I mean, I used to, wait a minute, man, I'm not ready for this, and I'm not ready to take this step. But I had guys on my team who really did live strong, and so I got to see it, acted out the right way. I just wasn't, God hadn't really called me. I wasn't ready. I just wasn't. I wasn't ready to give up what I thought the world had and what I thought was success in my head.
So you're really good. You graduate, and I imagine you're hoping you're going to get drafted.
I'm not just hoping. I'm counting on it, right? I go to the combines, and I can remember I come out. I'm two-time all-conference. I'm rated by Mel Kiper, who does all the draft stuff, as the number 3 center coming out. So I'm thinking this is a no-brainer. And so at Keenan Flagler, the business school at Carolina, that's the undergrad I was in. They give you opportunity to apply and interview for jobs, so that when you come out of school, you're already placed. And I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna take any of those. I'm good. I know what I'm gonna do. I know where my career is headed. And I come out of the combine, which is actually in Indianapolis, and I come out of the combine. I would go from number 3 to number 9 or whatever it was, because I get measured, and they're like, he's got short arms and he's small. And I remember thinking, I play with these same arms, right? Like, they didn't just get shorter. I feel, and they talked about that I couldn't compete in the NFL. And so when you go from 3 as a center, the third, you're a third, fourth round kid at number 3, at number 9, you're not getting a job. And so I wasn't drafted and came out, and I just remember feeling like the world had fallen in on me. and you're sitting there, and Karen's crying after the draft because we had expectations that things were going to happen, and they didn't happen. And I called my mom. I'm like, Mom, I can't believe this has happened. And I remember she just, very matter of fact, she said, well, baby, God just took it away from you. He gave you every opportunity to live for him and glorify him through the gift he gave you, and you didn't do it, and you knew you should have.
Wow,
Just
really?
Bam! You're like, Mom? Like, what kind of phone call is this?
That is direct.
Direct,
Yeah.
and she pulled no punches, and she said she went to First Baptist Church of Atlanta, which is Charles Stanley Church, and she said, I have a message, or I have a sermon that I've written notes on. I'm going to mail them to you. And at this point, I'm mad. I'm like, all right, great, whatever. Send whatever. Obviously you're not in my corner. And she said, no, I really think you need to read these. And so she mails them. But in the interim, the Baltimore Ravens call. And they said, hey, we need a center to come in. And, we need somebody to come in. And I didn't know how the NFL worked at the time. So I thought, oh, it all worked out. Don't worry about it. And so I go into Baltimore, and I remember I walked in the room, the offensive line room, and I was like a little bush around trees. I'm looking up, all these men are huge. You have Jonathan Ogden, Jeff Blackshear, Orlando Brown, who is now passed away, but he was an enormous human being. And I'm this little stubby, light center. I think everybody weighed 320 or more. And so I knew this was going to be a short-lived career. And so
Are you holding your arms out against
theirs
to kind of
like, is this good? And so that didn't last very long. And I remember I called Karen and I said, well, I got good news and bad news. And she's like, well, what is it? I said, well, the good news, I'm coming home to you, but the bad news, I just got cut. And so, we began our life together thinking that the football was done.
So how did you get back in football?
Nate Hobgood-Chittick, who was my roommate in college, goes in to see Bill Polian. And so Nate, just so you know, was not a celebrated college player, and he gets on the practice squad of the Giants. And he gets taken from the Giants practice squad to the Indianapolis Colts active roster. So basically what that means is when the Colts bring you over is you have to be active for 3 games. So if there's a roster of 53, you're the 53rd guy.
Got it.
Like you're on your way out pretty soon. You're just a you're a stopgap. And so Bill Polian always had an open door policy, and Nate went in and knocked on Bill's door and said, hey, listen, man, I've been on 2 teams and have played some now, and I'm telling you, the center that I played against in college is better than every guy that I've played against in the pros, and you should give him a chance. And Bill asked who it was, and he said, and Bill so happened to have been the GM for the Carolina Panthers when I was at UNC. And he tells the story that he wanted me, and the scouts at Carolina talked him out of it. I know Bill pretty well now. I don't think anybody talked him out. I don't think he was really sold on me, but he did. And, he did give me a chance. And he used to call me a little roly-poly because I was a round body. He said I didn't pass the eyeball test. I wasn't the prettiest body. But he gave me an opportunity, and I was very fortunate and played and started at guard in 1999 for the Colts and got a game ball. And the next year they moved me to center, and 13 years there and a year in Green Bay, and I couldn't ever ask for a better career.
You're, I think, 6-time Pro Bowler, winningest center quarterback combination in NFL history with Peyton Manning.
Yeah.
You win the Super Bowl in 2007, I believe, Super Bowl 41.
Yeah.
You signed big, lucrative contracts. I mean, it's just the epitome of an athletic career. But somewhere early on there, you begin to realize that something's missing, and a few guys, teammates, start to invest in you. I'd like you to describe that part of your journey. Yeah,
so in 1999, when I get to the Colts, I had been kind of, after the draft, I had started kind of feeling my way. After my mom sent me the sermon by Stanley, I started kind of searching for God, is what I say. I was like, I didn't really know if I'd bought into all this. And so I began to go to church some. And I remember I met a pastor of a church, and he was a kind of a manly man. And it was really the first guy like that I saw that was a Christian, that he liked to do. He liked football, he liked to hunt, he liked to feed, whatever it was. He liked to be outdoors. And so I kind of gravitated towards him, and I enjoyed listening to him, and but I still wasn't all the way sold out to it. And I get brought in by the Colts, and I remember I sit down in the locker room, and I'm looking around the locker room, and guys like Mark Thomas, who had won a Super Bowl with the 49ers and was with the Bears, Tony McCoy, who was a first-round pick out of Florida. These guys start asking me just different questions. Hey, you want to come, hang out, come to dinner, just befriending you. And as a rookie, especially an undrafted one, you got no friends. And so, you're searching for anything. A free meal, I'm all for it. And so I would go and we would just have real conversations. And they weren't pushing anything. They were just, how are you adjusting here? Tell me what you're going on in your life. And, once you got that friendship going, then you'd ask a little deeper question. Where are you with Christ, and what's your life look like? And I remember they both kind of challenged me. And at the time, Hunter Smith was a rookie. I was a rookie. There were guys like Adam Meadows and Tarek Glenn who, faith-wise, we weren't saved, but we were all kind of just interest was piqued. And I remember I'm sitting in the locker room, and I'm looking around, and I'm looking at, I had a vision of what an NFL player looked like, right? Everybody has a dream. Yeah. And my dream was to play in the NFL. So I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking, these guys got it all. They got fame, they got money, they got beautiful wives, incredible cars, you name it. This is what it's all about. And I looked around the room, and I remember they would look at me and say, look around the room and see if the void is still there. See if it fulfills the dream that you really think would be fulfilled by playing. I remember I looked around the room, and I'm talking, there's some Hall of Fame guys in this locker room, and I'm early, and these are old guys that I'm playing with. And they were a train wreck. And their lives, their marriages, their friendships, they weren't anything that I wanted to emulate. And then I looked at the Christian guys, and again, they weren't the highest paid. They may not be the most decorated. None of that. It wasn't that. It was just a stability of life that they provided, that in the ups and downs, they were still the same guy. Win or lose, they treated me the same. Undrafted free agent, first round pick, didn't matter. None of that, the resume, it was who you were and who are you now. And that made such a marked difference in my life. And so I got saved in '99, and those guys discipled me. They showed me in the Word. They taught me how to study the Word of God and how important it is. Listen, don't listen to me. Go find it for yourself, right? And so as my relationship with Christ got more and more, I began to share it with Karen, and she was not saved at the time, and so I remember I called her and I told her, I was like, listen, I've been going to these Bible studies. She's like, you've been doing what? I was like, no, for real, I've been going, and it's been kind of crazy. I remember, I never forget, I tell people all the time, and she's like, well, in her head, or this is what she told me later, because I thought, what's better than strip clubs, right? So just to show you, where I once was to where, and I remember she came up, she moved up. We had been married, and she moved up because we were so scared I was going to get cut. She stayed. She's a physical therapist in North Carolina. So she's in North Carolina, operating that. And so she moves up in November of that year, and comes the first Bible study, and she got saved that night. And
oh my goodness,
she's crying, and the pastor asked her, or the pastor asked the whole room, do you have a day when your life changed, when you went from serving the world to serving God? And if you don't, when will you have one? And I remember she raised her, she goes, I don't, but next year, ask me this question again next year and I will.
Oh, wow.
And I just remember, at first I was, I was just taken back. But God, we honestly spent one married night in our apartment in Indiana before she was saved. And then so we started our journey basically together. I'm a month saved, and we grew from that point on.
You had people invest in you and disciple you, as you mentioned, and she had the same, and it just, I guess it's like a pyramid. Christ is at the top, and Karen's over here, and you're here. The closer you each grow to Christ, the closer you grow to each other.
That's exactly right.
And that's what's happened for you.
Yeah, and she had women who were seeking Christ at the same level. It wasn't about how much your husband makes, what he does for a living. Is he a starter? Which in the NFL world you can get really caught up in. It doesn't matter how, it's a tricky world, right? And so as I just watched her and how she was set apart, that she never got caught, And my wife is as open as you can possibly be. And you've met,
authentic and transparent.
Yeah, she is not scared to be real. And so it was refreshing to be, to be around her and with those women who were pouring into her life.
That's beautiful, the pyramid in action. I can't have you here and not have you tell the story about Peyton Manning and on what count the snap was going to be.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this is a great one. So people ask me the funniest thing that's ever happened on the field. And so we're in Denver, and I can't remember what year it is. This was probably our 4th or 5th year. And it's the game that Mike Vanderjagt kicked, 2 50-plus yarders. It's the snow game in Denver for us to win. And we had studied all week that they were going to be in a certain defense, and we get there and they've changed defenses. So now going from a 4-down defense to a 3-down meant that instead of me being uncovered, I had a big nose guard head up on me. And this nose guard happened to be Chester McLaughlin, who's one of the best ever. And he's no longer here either, but he was a fantastic man and a great football player. And so I'm nervous now. I'm like, look, this is going to be completely different. Our calls and how we're going to communicate, and you're on the road, and it's really loud anyway. And so, we're going through it on the sideline, and finally the game gets going, and it's a good game, but the field's chewed up, and it's nasty, and it's a grinder of a game. And we're battling, and it's going back and forth, and I think it's the 3rd quarter, and we get in there, and Peyton is usually in shotgun, but for some reason we're under center this time, so he comes up under center. And we were on a snap count, which is it's a silent snap count, which is a pat, and that's the trigger. And then I give a snap count, and we go. And so I get up under there, and I'm making all my calls. I'm calling the defense, what they're in. He's making his calls, and I'm talking to the guards. The guards are talking to the tackles. So there's a lot of action. The crowd's going nuts. I get down over the ball, and before I feel it, I'm like, I don't know what the snap count is. And I look over at the guard. I'm like, hey, what's the snap count? What's the snap count? He looks over and he gives me that. And I was like, this is not good, man. So you feel like after years and years, you kind of get a feel of when the quarterback's expecting the ball, right? You feel his hands move or shift. And so he gets under there and he gives the trigger, and I feel his hands, and I think, oh, this is it. So I snap that ball up there. And again, after you've snapped a long time, when the ball hits right and when it does. There's a sound and a feel, and it hits and it's not right. And I was like, uh-oh. And so I remember I looked down, and then there's the ball, right? And it's muddy and it's nasty. And I glance up, and I see Chester, who's 6'5" and 350 pounds. And his big head barely fits in his helmet. And he looks down, and I look down. And I'm going to drop to grab the ball. And as I do, I see Peyton's helmet just pop right here. And as I'm going down to grab the ball, Peyton's falling on the mud, and we fall like side to side. And we get squished by Chester, who's now draped over the top of, and my face is this way, and Peyton's face is this way. And we're both in the mud because it's filthy, and we're laying down, and Big Chester's belly's like draped over both of us. And Peyton's in this high-pitched girl voice. It was on 2. It was on 2. And I am crying down there. I'm laughing. I'm like, man, that is horrible. And Chester's giggling, so I could see his belly bouncing.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, it was the best, man. It was the best. And we won the game. So, whenever you win the game, all those things go away. But it's those moments that you miss, the miscommunication that you can laugh about later, or those stories, but that was one of the funnier moments in my career.
You've had an amazing career. You had that fumble recovery that led to the conference championship. You had key blocks and plays, of course, in the Super Bowl to win that. But it's obvious that what's most important to you is your relationship with Christ, and that football is a playground, in essence, for you to express your relationship with Christ, to live it out. You have a routine. I've been in the car with you, and you evidently bless your kids every night before they go to bed.
Yeah.
I'd like you to talk about where that came from and how that works.
Yeah. So we made a commitment. We're going to start our days off with you. So every morning we get up, or most mornings, that we share the Bible. So we read a children's Bible or a story as they get older every morning, and feel like it's important just to saturate them in the Word and show them how important. Just a daily routine of seeking the truth first, right? And we believe that the Word of God is the truth and the ultimate standard, and that's what we set our lives by. And so we talk about the stories. You know, I have a 7-year-old now, and my oldest is 13, but I still love going back and reading the cartoon and looking at the picture of Samson and the muscles, he's knocking things, you know, and they love when you act them out.
Oh, yeah.
And
because your arm's probably the same length as Samson.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But I remember Clyde Christensen, who was a coach for he's still a coach for the Colts now. But I remember him telling me how he used to act out. He used to tell me, "You're one of those New Testament Christians, aren't you, Saturday?" He's like, "You better tell your kids Old Testament stories too." And so I would always, but so then I took it, I was like, I'm going to act them out too. And so, you know, acting out those stories with the kids, and then at night, giving them a sense of peace that, you know, we are going to thank God that the day turned out the way it did. And it may not have all went our way, but we're going to give God thanks for the protection and that, you know, he's ultimately sovereign over all. And we're going to trust him, and we're going to move to the next day.
Well, Jeff, I just appreciate you so much. I appreciate your investment in the kingdom, in Youth for Christ, and the example you are in a world that needs it. And love watching you on ESPN. We're sorry to lose you as a citizen of Indiana, but after the winter, I fully understand.
Yeah, I hear you, man.
And it's just been such a blessing to have you here. If somebody's watching today, I wonder, maybe they're not there. They're like where you were in college. What would you say to them?
You know, be who you are and come as you are, right? God doesn't need you cleaned up. He's not looking for you to be perfect. He created you, and he knows where you are, and you're at the area or a point in your life for this reason. And you're watching the show for a reason, and nothing is for accident. And I tell you to seek him and ask him to reveal himself to you. And that was literally my prayer to God. God, make yourself real to me. Let me understand, open my eyes and open my heart that I can receive you. Because right now, I'm not even at a place to do that. And I remember those prayers, and God's small and in little increments would show himself to me in little ways, and just how powerful that was. And trust him that there is a plan. And I talked about it this morning. You know, a lot of times our faith is forged in the difficult moments of our life. Mm-hmm. And you know, don't despise those moments. You may be at rock bottom, you may be heading towards rock bottom, but understand that God does his greatest work there. And there's nothing that you can add to that, right? That's when it becomes God, and it's no longer about you and your strength. And I share that with you because that's where I was. You know, I had looked at all these men who I thought had it all, and I saw a huge void in their lives. I didn't want that. I didn't want to repeat that. I wanted to emulate the one that had peace that transcended all in their lives. And that's what Christ is. But you got to give it all to him and surrender it to him.
Amen. Jeff, thank you so much. Love you,
Thanks,
brother.
Man. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.